Somewhere in 1986, a television director looked at the Tony Award-winning Broadway legend Ben Viren and said, "I want you in my show. The actors will all be dressed as zoo animals performing Broadway musical numbers inside of a fantasy village designed by the same guy who built Pee-wee's Playhouse." Ben Viren says, "Oh, this sounds like the hit modern Broadway musical Cats." Well, sort of like a off-Broadway version of Cats, made for toddlers. And by some stroke of luck, Ben Viren said yes. An off-Broadway musical it might have been, but this show's history is still pretty incredible. The puppets on the show were built by the man who would go on to invent the iconic Furby. The theme song was written by the guys who would create the Power Rangers. And the whole thing was bankrolled by a greeting card company after a toy company got cold feet and walked away. If that sounds like I'm making this up, congratulations. You now understand what it felt like to be a child who watched this show and then spent 20 years trying to convince anyone it was real. Zoobilee Zoo was created by Steve Binder, a man whose resume reads like a Hollywood Mad Lib. He directed Elvis Presley's '68 comeback special, the TV event that literally resurrected the King's career. He won an Emmy for a Barry Manilow special. He also directed the infamous Star Wars Holiday Special, which is widely considered one of the worst things ever broadcast on American television. And to prove I'm not exaggerating, here is a quick clip, but I warn you, it is very unsettling.
I exist for you. We are excited, aren't we?
Which, by the way, explains so much. The man had a very specific talent for putting actors in unsettlingly hairy prosthetic makeup and making them sing on camera. By the mid-80s, Binder wanted to do children's television. The original concept was cooked up by Hallmark Entertainment. Yes, the company that sells you overpriced paper with poems on them for Mother's Day decided they wanted to make a children's show. Their first partner was Mattel, the toy giant. But Mattel took one look at the concept and backed out entirely. Imagine being the show that Mattel, the company that put Barbie in every imaginable situation, decided, this is just a little too weird for us guys. So DIC Enterprises swooped in, the French-American animation studio behind Inspector Gadget and Heathcliff, and the production partner, WQED Pittsburgh, the same PBS station that made Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So we've got Elvis's director, a greeting card company, a French animation studio, and the house that Fred Rogers built, all collaborating on a show about singing zoo animals. This is not a Wikipedia article. This is a heist movie. All 65 episodes were filmed during a single concentrated stretch in the spring and summer of 1985, a full year before the show ever aired. Then it was distributed through first-run syndication, meaning it wasn't on any network. It just appeared on random stations, in random time slots, in random cities across the country. Which, by the way, is the single most important detail about this show, and the reason you might have spent your entire adult life questioning your own memory. But we'll come back to that. Here's what people get wrong about Zoobilee Zoo. They call it a kid's show about singing animals. That's like calling Pippin a show about a guy who takes a walk. Zoobilee Zoo wasn't a kid's show with music. It was a Broadway musical that happened to air at 6 in the morning for toddlers. And that distinction matters because it explains everything about why this show looked, sounded, and felt like nothing else on television. Think about it. Ben Vereen was a Tony-winning performer who had played opposite Bob Fosse. Gary Schwartz, who played Bravo Fox, had been performing mime alongside Pete Seeger since he was 13 and studied under Viola Spolin, the woman who literally invented modern improv. Forrest Gardner, Van Gogh Lion, was a dancer who had performed in Michael Jackson's Captain EO. Louise Valance, Wazot Kangaroo, went on to become one of the most prolific voice actresses in animation history and won a Daytime Emmy. Karen Hartman, Talkatoo Cockatoo, voice characters in Inspector Gadget, The Real Ghostbusters, and Super Mario Bros. These were not people in goofy costumes. These were absurdly accomplished performers giving Broadway-level commitment to a show most of the country didn't even know existed. And by the way, Gary Schwartz, the mime comedian Fox, he later became internationally famous for voicing Heavy Weapons Guy and Demo Man in Team Fortress 2. So if you've ever been obliterated by a Heavy in TF2, just know that the man behind that voice once sang educational songs in full Fox makeup for 4-year-olds. You're welcome for that information. And the production matched. Jeremy Railton, who designed the sets, also designed Pee-wee's Playhouse and the opening ceremony for the 2020 Winter Olympics. The show won the 1987 Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Costume Design. Bill Corso, one of at least 6 makeup artists on staff, would go on to win the Oscar for Best Makeup for Lemony Snicket. These costumes took roughly 3 hours of prosthetics and paint per actor per day. The result was something that sat in the deepest, most unsettling corner of the uncanny valley. Real human faces, clearly visible, sculpted into animal features with latex and pigment, not puppets, not mascot heads, not animation, something the brain just could not file correctly. And here's the part nobody talks about. Remember Caleb Chung, the guy who built the puppets and played a recurring character named Burt Backtrack? After the show ended, Chung pivoted from performer to toy inventor. In 1998, he co-created the Furby. 40 million units sold, one of the defining toys of the late 90s. The guy who made puppets for a Fever Dream kids show went on to create the electronic toy that convinced an entire generation their bedroom was haunted.
Sheer terror!
Meanwhile, the theme song, credited to Haim Saban and Shuki Levy, the Israeli-American duo who had scored practically every DIC show in existence, these two would go on to co-found Saban Entertainment and co-create Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So the same musical minds that would eventually give the world Go Go Power Rangers first gave preschoolers Zoobilee Zoo. Everyone up, everyone in. Time for the fun to begin. I don't know how to process that information, and frankly, I don't think any of us should have to. But here's the real genius of this show, and it's the part that flies completely under the radar. Zoobilee Zoo aired in 1986, right in the middle of Reagan-era FCC deregulation. Children's programming guidelines had been effectively gutted. The airwaves were flooded with 30-minute toy commercials, Transformers, He-Man, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony. Not one of the 3 major networks was running a regularly scheduled educational show for kids. Zoobilee Zoo chose a different path. Each of the 6 main characters embodied a different creative discipline. Van Gogh was visual art, Bill was invention, Talkatoo was storytelling, Bravo was performance. Wazat was music, Lookout was exploration. The show wasn't teaching letters, it wasn't teaching numbers. It was teaching kids that there are many different ways to be creative, and all of them count. That framework lined up almost perfectly with Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, which was gaining prominence in education at the exact same time. The show was endorsed by the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, and Action for Children's Television, the most notoriously strict children's media watchdog group in the country. This was a show built on artistic substance during an era designed to crush exactly that. And it aired so quietly that most of its audience didn't even know its name. Every episode followed the same structure. Mayor Ben, in full snow leopard face paint, looked directly at the camera and called the audience Zoobaroos. He introduced the theme. The Zoobles encountered a problem any kid would recognize: being afraid of the doctor, learning to share, telling the truth. They worked through it together using their different talents. Songs and dances happened constantly. And then Mayor Ben wrapped it up, looked you in the eye again, and made you feel like the lesson was just for you. The closest comparison was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which was literally made at the same PBS station. But where Fred Rogers gave you gentle, one-on-one intimacy, Zoobilee Zoo gave you the same emotional safety through a full-blown musical revue performed by adults in animal prosthetics. Which, honestly, is one of the most unhinged creative decisions in the history of children's television, and I mean that as the highest possible compliment. And Ben Vereen wasn't doing this as a paycheck gig. This was a man who'd been pulled into performing arts as a kid growing up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. His own mother worked as a wardrobe mistress for vaudeville performers. He later said he was just a kid who was good at playing stickball until somebody enrolled him in a performing arts program and changed his life. Zoobilee Zoo was Vereen paying that forward. He believed the performing arts could transform children the same way they'd transformed him. When someone asked him at a Broadway opening about a reunion, he didn't hesitate. He just lit up and said, "You're a Zoobaroo! You're a Zoobaroo!" And maybe that's the part that matters most. Because here's the thing about Zoobilee Zoo that nobody really talks about. After the original run ended in 1987, those 65 episodes kept airing, syndication on random stations. PBS affiliates, the Learning Channel, the Hallmark Channel, VHS tapes released through 1997. It ran for almost 15 years. That means kids born anywhere from the late 70s through the mid-90s could have watched it. But because it was never on a single network, because it showed up in early morning time slots in different cities on different channels, and because it was never released on DVD and has never appeared on any streaming platform, something strange happened. Millions of people grew up with a vivid, unshakable memory of watching human faces painted like animals, singing and dancing in a colorful fantasy village, and they couldn't name it. They couldn't find it. They couldn't prove it was real. People posted on forums for years describing what they'd seen. Half-remembered images. A leopard man. A kangaroo who pulled instruments out of a pouch. A beaver who built things. And nobody believed them. One person wrote online, "I am 21 now, and I was starting to think this show was a figment of my imagination." Another said, "Whenever I mentioned the show to anyone, they never heard of it. I almost thought I was imagining it." A viral post in a nostalgia group was captioned simply, "No, you didn't make it up." That's what Zoobilee Zoo became. Not a show people watched, a memory people spent decades trying to verify. And somehow, against all odds, a community found each other. A podcast with over 45 episodes. Michael Moynihan, the guy who played Lookout Bear, showing up at conventions to meet fans who hadn't seen his face without bear makeup since they were in diapers. A virtual reunion during COVID lockdown in 2020, the original cast gathering on Zoom because of course they did. Just a group of people who made something beautiful in 1985 and a generation of viewers who refused to let it disappear. And I think there's something in that experience that goes beyond this one show. Because we all have those memories, not just of TV shows, but of feelings. Moments from childhood that were so vivid and so specific that they feel more like dreams than memories. The way a certain room smelled. A song you can hum but can't name. A feeling you had at a very particular time of day that you've never been able to explain to another person. We spend most of our adult lives in certainty. We know what we know. But every once in a while, something pulls you back to a place where you weren't sure what was real and what was imagined, where the world was strange and bright and didn't have to make sense, where a man painted like a snow leopard could sing you a song, and that was just what Tuesday mornings look like. Zoobilee Zoo didn't disappear because it was forgettable. It disappeared because the system it was built in, syndication across thousands of different stations and thousands of different time slots, made it impossible to hold on to. It was designed to reach children. It was never designed to be remembered. And yet, here we are, still remembering, still looking for proof, still asking, did I dream that? No, you didn't dream it. It was real, and it was made by people who cared deeply about showing kids that creativity comes in many forms, and every single one of them matters. That's not nostalgia, that's something you needed to hear when you were 4. And honestly, you might still need to hear it now. If this unlocked a memory you forgot you had, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. We do this every single week, digging up shows that shaped you in ways you didn't realize until just now. Drop a comment with the show you swore was real that nobody remembered. I read every single one, and I promise you, somebody in this comment section watched it too. I'll see you in the next one, Zoobaroos.